Almighty God, we have the high honor and the serious duty to manage the educational affairs of our beloved city. Fill us, O God, with a spirit of unity and understanding which enables us to face our multiple problems with a serene mind, with justice and charity for all, so that any and all decisions made by us will always be for the betterment and greater happiness of all of our fellow citizens. So help us God. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. All right. Mr. Greeno, would you call the roll?
Alderman Dodd.
Present.
Alderwoman Wilshire.
Here.
Alderwoman Clee.
Here.
Alderwoman Lou.
Here.
Alderwoman Harriet Gathright.
Present.
Ms. Raymond.
Here.
Mr. Guarino is here. Ms. Bishop.
Here.
Ms. Brown.
Here.
Ms. Gilio.
Here.
Also with us, we have Mr. Lee, Mr. Ouellette, Mr. Dubois, Mr. Smith, Ms. Fitzpatrick, Mr. Donovan, and also from the Board of Education, Ms. Johnson is with us in the audience.
Okay, thank you. For the new aldermen that are here, if you want to speak, you have to turn the microphone on. It's different than our chamber. And when you don't want to speak, you just touch it like that. So I assume the Board of Ed people already know about that. Okay, we have a full board. So the first order of business is election of a joint special building committee chairman for the 2020 to 2022 legislative session. Alderman Wilshire?
I move to nominate Alderman Dowd as chair of the joint special.
Okay. I've been nominated. Is there any other nominations?
I'll move that nominations be closed.
There's a motion to close nominations. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All those in favor of electing Alderman Dowd as the chair for the 2022 session, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Now we have election of a vice chair. Typically, we like to have someone from the Board of Education be the vice chair.
I'd like to nominate Mr. Guarino. Surprise.
Are there any other nominations? Do I hear a motion to close nominations?
I'll make that motion to close nominations.
Alderman Wilshire. The motion's been made to close nominations. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All those in favor of electing Mr. Guarino as the vice chair of the Joint Special School Building Committee, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Congratulations. Now you get two jobs. All right. Do I have a motion for approval of the previous meeting minutes of November 21st, 2019 that was held at the main Dunstable Elementary School?
I move to approve the meeting minutes from the prior meeting on November 21st, 2019.
Mrs. Raymond made the motion to approve the minutes of the November 21st, 2019 Joint Special School Building Committee held at the main Dunstable Elementary School. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Remarks by the chairman. All right, just a few things. Welcome to the start of the detailed design phase of the middle school project and meeting number 1 of the 2020-2022 legislative session. And while we're on that, thank you for selecting me as the chair of this committee for this phase of the project. It's a very important project, and we will do our best to get it done on time and under budget. Just a few remarks for all the new members. Getting ready for the joint special meetings Please read up on the project and the Nashua website and get as much background information as you can. In preparation for these meetings, review the minutes of the previous meeting in case there's anything in there you might disagree with, or also to get caught up to speed on where we're at. And review any attachments to the minutes, such as vendor contracts, proposals, and anything else that's attached by the school district. Typically, in years past, we had 18 members of the Joint Special School Building Committee, and a couple of years ago, we changed that because it was extremely hard to get quorum, especially in the summer. So now we're 10. In discussions with former Alderman McCarthy, we had determined that when we get into the middle school project that we would not have a construction committee, because if that were 6 members, that would be a quorum of this committee, which wouldn't make any sense. So, however, all decisions made on this project will now be done at this level, at the joint special. So nothing would come to you from the approval of a construction committee. It would all be handled here. However, we are going to have an executive committee. Oh, by the way, the construction committee is usually appointed by the chair of the joint specials, so won't be doing that. But we are going to have executive committee because we can't go 30 days without meeting with the contractors. And typically there are questions they have for us, and we have to meet with them. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to have the chairman of the Board of Aldermen, president of the Board of Aldermen, the president of the Board of Education join myself in any meetings we have with the contractors. If there's no objections from anyone, that's the way we'll proceed. Okay? All right. Also, in the last session, we approved this building project. Let me start by saying there are times when we're building things, especially when we get to the new school, any construction projects, we can't wait on decisions by calling a joint special school building committee. There are emergencies that happen. I give you an example. When we were building this school, we got to a point where there was a pipe on the 3rd floor and there was a pipe on the 1st floor and no pipe on the 2nd floor. And they couldn't wait 30 days to finish that work. So the chairman of the joint special gave them permission to proceed, and then it was approved at the next joint special. It's sort of emergency. So in the last session, we gave Mr. Smith, approval up to $5,000 and approval of the chair up to $50,000. And if there are anyone that has any objections to that, we'd like to keep that going into 20 to 22. Seeing none, okay. Let's see. Again, all contracts, all approvals will all be done at this level at this Joint Special School Building Committee. All right. And welcome to all the new members. The next order of business, remarks by school administration. Mr. Donovan?
None. Mr. Smith, you have any?
Mr. Smith?
We should follow chain of command, though. Should go Donovan, Dan,
Sorry.
then me.
I did have her second, just,
Did you have any?
Mrs. Fitzpatrick, do you have?
Just an update that the architects are coming to Fairgrounds Middle School to meet with the staff that are specifically affected by the renovations, and the principal and assistant principal. I'll be there. And then meeting with the entire faculty on February 5th. So January 31st for the visit, and then February 5th for the whole faculty.
And we are going to be having numerous meetings with different groups as we go through this process, and I think it's best if we try and keep the the ones that are available to the public to attend on the school website. So if we could just make sure that that happens.
Yes, I sent the email, but I was waiting for a response, so I'm happy with that. I'll make sure it happens. Thank you.
All right.
Alderman Dowd.
And then,
Mr. Smith?
see, it flows downhill, so I have to come over
Yes.
here. So along the same lines, we've scheduled an abutters forum for the new middle school. So that'll be on March 19th at 7 p.m. at Bicentennial Elementary School. We were going to do it in Main Dunstable because that's actually closer to the school, but they have a lot of functions going on that night, so we shifted to Bicentennial. Most likely in the cafeteria at 7 p.m.
All right, we'll have more on that as we get closer to it.
Yeah,
Anything
again,
else?
that's meant to be the people that live around the new proposed middle school, Medallion Court and Cherrywood and those places.
Yeah, and it's our intent to have many meetings with the neighborhood as we go through this process in just a second. We are going to be commencing in this detailed design phase, correct me if I'm wrong, by the way, we're going to be starting with Fairgrounds and doing the work at Fairgrounds, followed closely by work on Pentauch, because Pentauch has to be completed before the new school opens. And then we will be working on the new school. So I'm sure they'll be talking to a schedule later, but the new school's a ways down the stream at this point. Okay. Anything else, Mr. Smith?
That's all I have, thank you.
All right. Alderman Clee?
Yes, with the new redesign of the Nashua.edu, a lot of the stuff is missing, including the middle school project.
Yeah,
So-
so,
I can speak to that. It's under construction.
Raymond?
Yes, so the website is still under construction. It's up. A lot of things are running, some things are not. And so I understand. I've seen it. And so they're doing weekly upgrades. So instead of every single day having our IT department run around trying to respond to all of the help tickets, they're doing it once a week. So we should check back next week, and some things that are missing should be there. If anybody needs anything, feel free to email myself, or you can email boe@nashua.edu, or email the superintendent's office, and we can send you the information that you're missing. But in the meantime, our IT department has asked us to be a little patient while they get all of the details and all of the links working on the website.
Alderman Clee?
With this project, and I understand, I worked.
You're not on the microphone.
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay. I
Well,
can't
it's
hear you.
That's okay, I'm sorry. With the public wanting to be able to see this at all time, I really would like to see this become priority. And I know that in the grand scheme of things, it may not seem like a priority, but when we're trying to be as transparent, and we've got the public that are here and that want to see what's going on, and we've even, as Alderman Dowd had said, telling the newer members to go on there and to look at it. I think it is an important thing. It does need to be a priority.
Right.
And I know I personally have gotten 3 phone calls about this not being there, and I did send something, so I know you're all aware of it.
Right.
But
I would
just
like
want
to-
the public to know
Right.
that we're working on it.
I would like to point out that our website has been up for 4 days. So, there's absolutely no, there's no malevolence here. It certainly is a priority. We're very excited about this project. We want the public to know what's going on. We want the public's input so that we get it right. $120 million is a lot of money for people to be unhappy. So we want everyone to be satisfied at the end of this. Having said that, it's the 4th day. And so IT is aware. I spoke with the superintendent about it myself earlier today, and he let me know that they're doing a weekly update. And another reason for that is we don't want to interrupt service for our teachers who are still trying to use this website to access their email. So when the website goes down for upgrades, then our staff can't access their things. So we need to make sure that we're doing this in a way that works for everybody.
Okay, good. All right. With that, architect's report. Harriman?
Very good. Thank you, Chairman Dodd. Tonight, what we'd like to do is introduce
You just-
Harriman to the... Oh,
They're transcribing this, so could you tell your name?
my name is Mark Lee.
Thanks.
That was, it stole my thunder. That was the next thing I was going to say here. But we're to introduce Harriman, the architects on the project, and we're very excited to work with all of you and the new folks that are coming on board as we embark on what is the phase 2 of the project. But what we thought we'd also do tonight is bring folks up to speed on where we've been to this point. And so we're going to cover kind of a recap of the phase 1, and that was ultimately to arrive at the scope of the project itself. And the scope of the project's important because that's what ultimately allowed Harvey Construction to determine what the cost of that work is expected to be. And so that we're going to cover. Jamie Willett, who's the project manager and architect at Harriman, is, and to my left, is going to guide us through that concept design overview. And that's a summary of, very, very high-level summary of the information that was prepared in the report, the Phase 1 report, which, as soon as the website is back up, I think everyone will get a link to that if they don't already have a copy. Also, we're going to sort of cover the anticipated project schedule of the three school projects, part of this work, so you get a sense of when things are happening. And then we'll look at the next steps and a highlight of those various aspects of the work coming up. And so it began with the initial objective, which was really looking at a deep dive into the condition and appropriateness of the Elm Street School to serve the district's middle school needs for the foreseeable future, and to evaluate that relative to what would it look like if we tried to renovate versus building a new school. And so we always had a benchmark of potentially renovating the Elm Street School as one option, and then evaluating that against a brand new middle school. So that was the primary objective at the beginning, and then additional objectives that were part of our study were to not only look at the Elm Street School, but really think comprehensively at all three middle schools in the district and how they're serving the needs of Nashua's middle school students, in particularly in thinking about how schools support education and development in today's world. The other consideration was to evaluate the schools for an approximately equal population of 800 students, and so 800 times 3 is 2,400, which is approximately the population of Nashua's middle schools, and it kind of ebbs and flows a little bit, but that was sort of a target to think about, and both Fairgrounds and Pentauch currently are under those enrollment numbers, and so what would it take to increase those enrollments to 800? So that was really the guiding task of the study, and so for the better part of last year, we went through a whole series of steps to evaluate the items that I just discussed in a great level of detail, and to do that, we met with several user groups, including the administrators of the schools themselves, as well as at the district level. And Ms. Fitzpatrick was key in helping us organize that aspect of it and connecting us with not only the administrators, but also there's a steering committee for the middle schools themselves, and we met with them as well. We also met with several departments, including the special education director for the district, the career technical education director, and that was important to understand how the middle schools are aligned with the career technology programs at the high schools. You have an incredibly robust CTE program here in Nashua, and so it was really, really important to understand how these pathways line up from the middle schools to the high school. We also met with the athletic director to understand how the middle schools currently are servicing the athletic and wellness needs of the students. We also met with safety and security, and to understand how the schools are working in that regard. And then we met with several folks at the city, including fire, police, the city engineers, planners, and the Department of Public Works. And that was important just to get their initial feedback before we really dug into any design and get their thoughts incorporated. We had the middle school steering committee, of which I spoke. We met with them. We met several meetings with the GSSBC, this body, the Board of Ed, and the Board of Aldermen, particularly as we got closer to a decision on what this project ultimately would be. In addition to that, we surveyed the administration and the teachers and staff at all the middle schools. So we invited the participation of all staff in a very direct way with a series of questions during our initial planning exercises to understand how the middle schools are supporting their roles in fostering growth in the students. Then we facilitated several community forums, some here and some at various locations around the city, particularly, again, as we get close to understanding what the project would be and as we moved toward a vote on the project moving into Phase 2. In addition to all of that work, we also inventoried all of the spaces. So we had not only architects but engineers go through the buildings to really understand the condition of the systems and what could we address, what needed to be addressed, and to help us prioritize the work that would be included in the project. And so that all culminated in what we call a concept design, and I'll just kind of give you, as we move forward through this phase, the second phase of the design, there are three phases that our industry uses to describe that. And the first phase is called the schematic design, and you'll hear SD or schematic design as we move forward, and we're in that phase right now. And then the next phase that we'll move into after the schematic design phase is called the design development phase, and then the final phase that we are in as we prepare documents for Harvey to price and build from is called the construction document phase. So it's SD, DD, and CDs. And so the concept design preceded those three phases, and that was really, again, to understand the probable scope. We didn't have everything nailed down exactly the way it's going to be, but it's an approximation that's enough for us to understand where all the major spaces are going to be, how large they are, in order for us to assign a cost for those. That concluded, and that's what Jamie is going to share with you now. As we move forward in those three successive phases, the design detailing gets greater and greater, and that's so we're now at a stage where we're going to get a lot more involvement with the actual folks that are going to be in those spaces that we're impacting, but we also want to solicit information from everyone as we move forward and keep everyone abreast of our progress. And so with that, I will turn it over to Jamie to kind of guide us through the concept design. Jamie?
Thank you, Mark. This is Jamie Willett with Harriman. The concept design, several of you have seen this, and anybody that's seen it online has seen these. These were kind of the plan moving forward. So I'll walk through kind of the quick scope of what those look like at each school. And like Mark said, as we get into the next as we're working through schematic and DD and CD, you'll start seeing these transform into a little finer detail each time. So I'll start off at Fairgrounds. The scope there at the site was to create a new perimeter drive or upgrade the perimeter drive around the building. We're looking to put additional parking in the back of the building. That's to help offset some of the parking that gets moved around with a new parent drop-off at the front of the building. And we're reconfiguring the bus loop so that the traffic from the parents dropping off students aren't crossing over with the buses. And then we're doing some on-street queuing upgrades to allow the parents to queue up before they come onto the site to help alleviate some of that traffic that's created. You move into the building. Here we're looking at doing a new administrative and secure entrance addition, upgrades to the unified art spaces, science room upgrades, team collaborative instruction spaces, gymnasium upgrades, some upgrades to the special education rooms, and some systems upgrades at this particular school. I'll move through kind of quick. If anybody has a question, I don't know if we'd rather wait till before or after, during or after, or...
Yeah, I would say if you have any questions as we go through, members of the committee, you can ask them, or when we get through, we'll ask again whether you have any questions.
Okay. So then over in Pentauch, that site has one access into the drive, into the site. So we're looking to improve that by adding an emergency entrance. You'll see that noted on G down below. But also improve the main entrance to the building with a traffic light and new pathways going in and out of there, and some new lanes. There'll be a signal at that intersection to help with the flow there and the crossing of students that do happen to cross that street. We'll have a light there to help get them across the road. There's modulars at this building that will be removed, and in order to help the population growth in that school, to bring it up to the about 800 students, we had to add some additions. That also accounts for the modulars that would go away. So these two bars that are located at B would house the additional students plus the modular spaces that we're getting rid of. I'm kind of going out of order, so if you're not following me, I'll try to call it the letter. But A is a new library addition. There's some work inside that displaces that library, and we put that there on the front side of the building. There's a new bus loop, a new parent drop-off loop, reconfigured parking, and it's a pedestrian crossing. I think that's the mass of it.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
For the additional
Identify
square...
yourself
I'm sorry?
so they can transcribe.
Hello, this is Jessica Brown, Board of Education. So the fact that this school is already at overflow capacity with using so many portable classrooms, and probably if there's redistricting that happens, this school is going to be probably one of the greatest influxes of more kids. Have we really checked into how much square footage we're adding to accommodate that kind of population growth?
Yes. Yeah.
Also, I'll mention it here. Oh, go back. The odd shape of the library, where the portable classrooms were, the reason it's that shape is there is is it a water line or a sewage line?
It's a sewage easement.
Sewage easement that runs there,
drainage.
and you can't put a building over the top of it.
Yeah. Excuse me, Rick, it's storm drainage, not
Drainage.
sewage, sorry.
Yeah, I didn't think it was sewage.
Yeah, it's a rather large pipe. It's, I think Carl's right, it's 54 inches. To move that is quite an undertaking, and that may not be the final shape of the building as we move forward, that addition, but that right now accounts for that easement that goes through. So we're looking at how that we can fit that in and make it look attractive to the front of the building.
Mr. Dowd?
Yes, oh. Mrs.
Thank you.
Raymond.
And then Ms. Klee had her hand up as well.
Oh.
I spoke with some, earlier you said that there's an order, so first Fairgrounds, then Pentateuch. I happened to be speaking with some Pentauch staff yesterday, just happenstance, and a lot of them were questioning when their opportunity would be to give feedback on the conceptual design, because there's some concerns about like band space, storage, library space, and I know that we haven't gotten there yet, and you're planning on. Is there a timeline for that at this point?
Yeah, we'll jump into that at the end, but I'll give a quick
okay,
summary.
sorry.
So Fairgrounds is kind of the fastest out of the gate. So we're working most diligently in that one right now. So we're getting some meetings set up for Fairgrounds. Quickly following that's going to be Pentauch, and we'll start having meetings with the staff and whatnot right after the Fairground one. I think at this point we're thinking, I believe it was like maybe March or maybe into April that we'd start having. I think March was start, but they may roll into a little bit into April. But Fairgrounds is kind of kicking off quickly, so we've started those, or started getting ready for those meetings.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mrs. Alderman Clee?
Thank you. I have two questions. One is first on Pentauch here with the bus loop. Will the buses be coming in and out of the same entrance, or will the buses, when they're exiting, go through the parent drop-off area? I would assume the outskirts of the parent drop-off area.
Yeah, so the exact direction of the buses has totally yet to be determined. We'd have to meet with the transportation director. But our thought right now is to enter in the bullet listed as G, come up around to where D is, and then they could actually come back around and come out where H is, so they're kind of following that same path, and then go down the main exit.
Okay. And then my second question actually is about Fairgrounds. And as Ms. Raymond had mentioned about Fairgrounds, it clicked in my head. I did have a call about Fairgrounds. Is part of this plan to help upgrade their HVAC issues? Because they're quite concerned that there's some heating and cooling issues there. And
Yeah.
I didn't know if that's part of this project. I could not answer that.
I can't recall exactly what we're doing to the mechanical systems. There would definitely be some upgrades where the admin's being reworked for sure, and some of the internal spaces are being looked at. I'd have to look at my scope and just be sure. I don't want to respond to that without the definite answer, but I'll follow up on that.
Thank you. I just wanted to put that out because that is one of their concerns, is temperature control and so on. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So as we move inside of Pentateuch, I'll kind of highlight some of the areas that are being looked at. The classroom bar additions on each flanking left and right of that building. Those are the classrooms to help for the portables and the increased capacity. B, as we spoke about before, is the library addition. C, there'll be some upgrades to some of the unified arts spaces. D, there's some science room upgrades. E is listed for team collaborative instructive spaces. So those are spaces that the students and staff can use to collaborate and work together. So those are kind of in each wing of the building, so to speak. F is gymnasium upgrades, and right now there's a stage addition, but we've had some discussions that, what that's going to be, where it's going to be. So those have not yet been totally finalized, but the discussions will be had. Upgrades to the special education rooms, and cafeteria expansion to help accommodate for the additional students. All right, then we have the new site that's down. I just realized that I forgot to put the slide on here that kind of shows where this is. I hope most people know where it is, but Cherrywood is the road that's located where it says H down there. That's Cherrywood Drive. And to the left, but kind of maybe off the slideshow here, would be Buck Meadow Road. So that's kind of down in that southwest quadrant of Nashua. Next time I come, if you haven't seen, I'll be sure to make sure I include that slide to show you where it is. Anyways, it's a 20-acre site development. There's typical kind of new building. It's got on-site parking, access drive around the building for emergency and for deliveries. There's play fields. There's like a soccer field, baseball, softball being investigated. Well, they're there, but just how the layout officially works will be looked at a little further. Not shown in this. We're looking at a track around the rectangle field. Then we have up in the north side of the site, D is a natural preservation area. There's some wetlands up there that has some natural habitat. So we try to preserve some of that for the wetlands that are there. Connection to trail networks. There's some existing kind of trail networks out through this area, and this would kind of allow that access to be used as needed. Access drive is coming from Buck Meadow. It's not shown here, but it's Buck Meadows off to the left, so the access drive would come in up where that F's located. I talked about the emergency access. Oh, no, that's emergency access from Cherrywood. So there's access drive that goes to the circle at Cherrywood there. That's an emergency access for vehicles that, if there's a fire or whatnot, they can use that. At this point, it's not intended as a entrance to the building for neighbors and whatnot. So that was a concern that a lot of the neighbors have had. So water and sewer is coming from Cherrywood, and power will be coming from Buck Meadow. We're looking at sidewalk to Buck Meadow, dedicated service and emergency drive I spoke about, that's K, and a sped play area on site. The building consists of 4 different levels. There's a ground level, which is located, if you kind of took where that bottom right ground level is and you slid it up underneath the closest portion that's in that same alignment of the building right there, that would be underneath that wing. So there's a ground level, then there's a first floor, which is also mostly ground level, and then a second and third floor. The building features would be a new secure entrance, innovative middle school classroom communities, ability to close off the public for after-school activities and community access, 21st century unified arts and STEM spaces, enhanced sped spaces, administration, nurse, and guidance spaces, gym, a performance space, cafeteria, library, and then there's a feature where you could add on where those H's are for additions if they were ever needed in the city of Nashua.
Mrs. Raymond?
Thank you. In disregarding E, which is kind of an idea to bring students back who are going out of district now, it seems to me in the plans that there's more special education classrooms in this new building than there are in Fairgrounds or Pentauch. And so I'm wondering if that is by design, if that is to help with the out of district, because I want to make sure we have equity between the 3 schools so that all of our students have the opportunity to go to school with students who are different than them, whether they're in special education or if they're in mainstream classrooms. So is there a reason why we have 1 wing on each floor in this one? I wasn't counting them yet, but I was.
Yeah, I think definitely out of district is located at lower level, was looked at as an out of district area.
Which is brilliant, and I love that. Let's do that.
If you think of Elm Street right now, there's, Mark, do you remember the names of those? There's the Bridges program.
And Project Achievement.
Project Achievement. The thought is that those spaces would come over to this school from where they are now at Elm Street.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
So as I mentioned before, there's a second and third floor, so they kind of, they sit over that hub wing, the wings there, and then there's a library up above, and then progressively the third floor gets a little bit smaller. It's just kind of classrooms above. All right, any questions on plans? Any further questions? All right, schedule. This is a kind of a brief schedule, and many of you have seen this. It's been kind of refined as Harvey and Harriman have met and discussed, as well as some of the other team members. Though right now it's looking like Fairgrounds it was anticipated to start construction in summer of 2020. That's the soonest of the starts, and so as I kind of mentioned earlier, we're diving into that one first to get that one moving so that we can get pricing docs out. We're looking at late spring, so. Anticipated construction duration for that is 11 months. Pentateuch is looking to have construction start in late fall with a 14-month construction schedule. And then the new middle school, the most amount of work takes a little bit longer. That is looking to be like winter, spring of 2021. That would be the construction start, and that would be a 2-year construction cycle.
Any questions on the schedule? And again, it's not cast in concrete, but it's for planning purposes right now.
So Harriman has intermediate dates that we're hitting for like a schematic design and design development, and then the CDs are the dates you kind of see up there, summer 2020. So those dates are being refined, working with the team to make sure we can get them nailed down. You'll see those come as we probably at the next meeting, we could start talking about some of what those are looking like. Mark will fill you in with next steps.
Very good. So as we move forward in the staggered start dates of the three projects, we are undertaking a number of engagement meetings to understand how to further refine the designs. And so to the points that have been asked, when will we be back to be able to evaluate and get more detailed feedback? We'll be back to Fairgrounds first. We'll then engage with the Pentauch, and then we'll engage with the folks at Elm Street to help us understand the needs of the programs that are moving to the new school. And in addition to that, we will be going back and doing even further detailed existing conditions evaluations, and that's now because as we know where the additions are going onto the buildings in the areas that we're renovating, we want to really fully document all of the pieces that we're going to be touching and modifying so that Harvey has clear understanding and their subcontractors have clear understanding of where the work is. We're also going to be undertaking the detailed programming workshops, and programming is another term that we'll use a lot, and that means the function of the spaces themselves. And so we're going to meet with the users to understand what they need in those spaces in order to conduct their programs. And so it's the what that goes on inside the school. We'll as we've stated, Ms. Fitzpatrick stated we're going to be starting that in earnest here in a week or so to really dig into Fairgrounds. We'll also conduct a series of community meetings moving forward, the first of which has already been spoken, the abutters meeting, but there'll be other opportunities, and we want to make sure that the public is aware of the project and has an opportunity to weigh in. We'll also be meeting again with the city planning staff, and that's important as we continue to refine the designs and so that they understand what is going to be asked of them to look at as we get into the permitting phase of the project. So we're already starting to line up the meetings with them on some of the decisions with the new site, as well as some of the minor elements of Fairgrounds, and then with Pentauch as well. As that will then move us into the planning board submissions, and there'll be a series of public meetings for the planning board as that moves through the city's process in permitting the site designs. In addition to that, our next steps are really digging into the detailed design, and as we kind of described, that'll happen in those three phases with most of the design decisions being made by the end of that design development phase. And the last phase, the construction document phase, is really when we're taking the designs and detailing all the things that need to be accounted for the contractor and subcontractors to price and build from. And then an important aspect of these projects is that they occur with the exception of Elm Street, with Fairgrounds and Pentateuch, they occur in occupied buildings. And so there's an important phasing planning that has to happen. And we've begun some of that discussion with Harvey and the building occupants, but there's a lot more that needs to be done to understand how we can conduct this work in a way that's as least disruptive to the operations of the buildings. It won't be that there will be no disruption, but we try to minimize that disruption as much as we possibly can through careful conversations about how they're using the schools, what can we disturb, and when is the least impactful time to disturb those. A good example of that is the gyms. We're doing work in the gymnasiums. It's almost impossible to find a time when gyms aren't being used throughout the school year, but we're going to look at the lowest utilization period and try to target renovation work for that time. So that's an important part of what we have to do. So we're anxious to be able to really roll up our sleeves and dig in. We're also looking forward to our monthly updates with you folks, and so that you can continue to ask us questions as the design unfolds and we share more and more information with you. And so with that, I think our last slide is if there are any additional questions, we'd be more than happy to answer.
Any additional questions? Mr. Guarino?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my question has to do with the process. You said that most of the decisions about design are going to be made so at the end of the phase 2. I would like to see our regular Board of Education meetings have updates specifically on this project, and I would like to get all of the members of the Board of Education on the same page, or at least a consensus as to the design. The opportunities for influencing the design from the Board of Education are going to come, I guess, in that phase 2.
So yeah, we're right now. I think that there'll be opportunities because again, they're phased or staggered the designs, and so as we go through the really important design areas, I think it'd be appropriate for us to bring updates to the Board of Ed. So we'll coordinate that through Chairman Dowd, and the best way to bring those updates to BOE.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. That way, members of our board who are not here can ask questions, and then we could have their voice in on the design. On the design.
That's a great idea.
Thank you.
The schools are being built for the education, so the Board of Ed and school administration are the ones that have the primary input, as well as staff. And we'd like you to come to a consensus as we go through the detailed design phase on what you want to see. But at some point, it's going to be locked in, and would be far too expensive to go back, and change things. When we get into detailed design drawings, they're hugely expensive to change because we've already hired contractors and bought material. And so there will be adequate time for decision-making by the Board of Ed and the administration and input to the architects so that it'll reflect what you're looking for. We're not building them for us, the city. We're building them for the education. So,
Thank you.
Mrs. Raymond, you have your finger on the button.
All right, I'm trying to decide how much I want to speak tonight. So I'm just hearing a lot of unrest amongst our staff and our families, and fear that the project is moving too quickly, fear that they're not going to have time for their input, concerns about the Board of Ed only having this meeting and not having more contact with the architects. And so I think as we move forward into this next phase, we're off to a good start with the schedules that you have worked out with Ms. Fitzpatrick, with Fairgrounds, but I will probably be asking, as I join this executive committee, for perhaps more time or to be able to attend more things so that we can make sure that the stakeholders at the school level are involved. Because again, it's so much money from the Nashua taxpayers. We want to make sure that we get what we want out of it and what's best for our kids. And I say this as a parent whose kids are going to miss it entirely. So,
Alderman Clee?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very glad to see that we're going to have some more community kind of input meetings. But one of the things I know at the last meeting, there was a teacher who spoke up about looking at the concept design and felt like her room was kind of more like a hallway, a pass-through, and so on. And I know that was addressed. And I know at that point in time you said that you would revisit that, look at it, and so on. And I think that's a great thing. And some of the other things that I heard from the public about the anxiety of the emergency route being able to going through their communities and so on. So as those things come up and people are hearing, I do want to speak to the public that's listening now. I do think that you guys are listening, and I do think that you're going to take these into consideration, but you're not going to know that unless they bring it to your attention. So thank you for those community.
Yeah, just one other thing. When we were doing the renovations of elementary schools, it was a lot easier because we took over the gymnasiums and made classrooms out of them. You can't do that in the middle school. So you have to be able to find a place for the kids to be when areas are being worked on. So that's part of the process. Any other questions for the architect? Yes.
Sharon Giglio, Board of Education. I read the details of the meeting on November 21st, and there was certainly a lot for me to learn from that. But one thing that jumped out on me was the question about the fog in the area of the new school. Several of the residents in the area brought that up, and I know we can't do anything about Mother Nature, but I don't know, if the fog is a situation that will change, if there's a building there versus fields, or, is someone looking into that? That's my question.
Yeah, and I believe the comment about the fog had to do with visibility at a few of the intersecting feeding roads that are in the area of Cherrywood. And I think what we will be looking at carefully is the impact of where we access the site and making sure that that's a very safe design in the way that people are brought to the primary access off Buck Meadow Road and making that as safe as we can. You're right, we can't control the fog, but we'll do our best to make sure that everything that we do is very safely designed and thoughtful. So we have a transportation engineer that's going to assist us in looking at how we design the access drive into the site.
Mr. Donovan.
Yeah, I live right near there, so I drive by where the entrance will be every day. The fog is mostly where the wetlands is. The wetlands won't move, so there will still be fog. But I think as Mark mentioned, where you put the drive, because that's a low area, and then it jumps up pretty quick after that. So I think that'll be the key.
All set. Any other questions? No? All right, I'd like to get the report from the construction manager, Mr. Carl Dubois from Harvey.
Yeah, good evening, folks. As stated, Carl Dubois, Harvey Construction. Don't have much to add. We're busy behind the scenes right now looking at Fairgrounds, developing a phasing plan that we can pass by the folks at Harriman and Sean, and then eventually the school. We take a swing at it first in terms of what we think we can get accomplished, and then we need to sit down with the principal to have him or her understand our approach, see if it's feasible. It's a back and forth for a time being to try to get it so that everybody understands how we're going to get through the building, how we're going to separate ourselves from the students. We do that all the time. And how we're going to provide a safe construction site. So we're in the process of looking, as Jamie and Mark alluded to, Fairgrounds is the first one coming out of the gate this summer. It's one of the more difficult ones, and Rick kind of stole my thunder a little bit here, but that's okay. Mr. Dowd, I've been involved with all of the elementary school renovations, and they were much easier than this. And the reason being is we utilized the concept we came up with in terms of building the gymnasium into temporary classrooms. So we created our own swing space. What I need to understand, and what I'm trying to get my arms around, is what do we have for swing space at Fairgrounds? There's always, doesn't usually appear on the surface, but as you start digging into it, there's usually some empty classrooms during the course of the day at all the schools that I've been involved with. So I'm trying to get my arms around what do you have for swing space, how we're going to do this. So we're getting prepared for a preliminary review on the 5th in terms of unveiling our first thought process in terms of how we do that. And we will do that for all 3 projects. It's much easier, obviously, on the new school. It's a green site. We're by ourselves. But we still, even on that site, would identify where construction access is going to be, where trailers would be, what have you, being in consideration of the neighbors that surround the site. We want to keep ourselves as far away from them as possible and as long as possible. So right now, for us, until the documents start coming along, we've been behind the scenes looking at schedule, looking at phasing, trying to get those things underway. It'll be, as not to repeat what was said earlier, but it would be Fairgrounds, then Pentateuch, and then the new school. And as we've done in the elementary schools, we will do the same here, where we will, I'm assuming, I'm not going to speak for Harriman, but we've done it at every elementary school. We have no problem holding a community forum and a teacher forum, staff forum, where we can sit down, walk through how we're going to approach the construction so they understand. Change is difficult. It's a human nature thing. People have difficulty with change. And I'll be the first to admit construction is disruptive. We try to minimize that as much as possible. We understand, we are friends, school still has to go on. That's the primary focus of what's going on, but we try to take a hard look at where we need temporary sound partitions to keep the sound down so students can still learn and it's not disruptive, how we maintain proper and adequate fire access for fire drills, all of that. So we'll go through all of that on all three schools. I will need the assistance, like we have in the past, from Harriman to determine what they call egress with units and how many students and faculty can exit a particular exit doors. There's only so many that can get through at a certain time. So there's a calculation that has to be done. From that, we will work with the principals so they will know the new fire alarm routes and how they're going to get out of the school and how they're going to bring the kids together for head counts and that type of thing. So we'll go all through that. When we think we have a plan, we'll also sit down with the fire department and the police department so they understand fully what's going to happen. I like to say that we operate where there are no surprises. It always comes down to just proper and good communication, so there's no surprises, either from parents not knowing what's going on or the staff not knowing what's going on. So there's a lot of pre-planning in the background going on right now until the documents are received and we can start putting harder numbers to this. So an update, that's pretty much what we've been doing since Christmas.
All right, any questions?
Any questions?
From the construction manager? There will be as we go forward. One of the more important things we do at the Joint Special School Building Committee is approve invoices, bills. And I can't sign and pay them until we get an approval from this committee. So we have one this evening. Mr. Smith, would you like to explain that one?
Yes, we have one invoice from RPF for $12,115. Sorry. We have one invoice from RPF Environmental in the amount of $12,115. And this was actually from phase one. So we had to hire an industrial hygienist to come take a look at the schools. We had one look at Elm Street, and then we had a separate one look at Fairgrounds and Pentateuch. So they identify all the potential hazardous materials, asbestos tiles, asbestos mastic underneath the tiles, lead paint, PCBs, what have you. So that's all been documented. It actually is on the website, or will be on the website when the report's back up there. So that's what this is. This is the payment for the report that RPF did.
You'll notice that it's on a sheet for the first part of the project that concluded December 31st, 2019. But I will need and we're going to be breaking out the different schools into different projects and budgets. So we'll allocate the invoices to that particular part of the project, and we'll bring them forth at each meeting. Right now, I need a motion to approve a payment of $12,115 to RPF Environmental. Alderman Wilshire.
I'll make a motion to pay $12,115 to RPF Environmental.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to pay RPF Environmental $12,115. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nay, anybody that disapproves? No? So we'll pay that bill. Okay, the other thing that we'll be doing quite a bit of is contract approval. So every time there is a new contract for vendor or part of the project, it will come through this committee for approval. As I mentioned, when you get your packages early on, please review the proposals if you have any questions, and sometimes they're kind of confusing. So, but if you're confused and you have a question, feel free to either reach out to me beforehand or bring it up at this meeting, and we'll get the answers for you. Mr. Smith?
Yes, as Alderman Dodd mentioned, a little quick tutorial. So with construction, you have what we call hard costs and soft costs. So hard costs are primarily what Harvey Construction is going to be billing us for. And when they've finished all the construction drawings, Harvey's going to come up with something called a guaranteed maximum price. And that is then, we hold their feet to the fire at that point. Both Harvey and us and the architect at this point have contingency amounts. So if something goes above and beyond, if we discover something that wasn't foreseen, then that's what those contingencies are for. If you all decide you want an extra classroom that we hadn't planned for, and it passes the muster of the entire joint special, then that's what those contingencies are for. So that's the hard construction. So soft construction's kind of everything else. We pay the architect for their work. We hire surveyors, we hire industrial hygienists, we hire geotechnical engineers, we buy boxes for the staff to use when they're moving from place to place. We most likely, we haven't discussed it internally, but we'll be hiring a moving company on moving day, particularly when Elm Street shuts down and we disperse everybody everywhere. The architect, by the way, is going to be assessing the furnishings we currently have as part of their scope of work. So we're not just go out and buying brand new furniture for every single school. We're going to keep what we have that's still in good condition and then go forward. So we've already bid out the work for the surveyors and the geotech, and we're just staying with them. So they stay with us through the entire contract. So the first one I'm introducing is Hayner Swanson. They're a Nashua firm, and they did a lot of surveying for us in phase one. And then the architect identified additional survey work they needed done at Fairgrounds Middle School, and we sent that to Hayner Swanson and received the bid that was included in your package. So this one, their not to exceed fee is $16,300, and I recommend we proceed with that change order.
Alderman Wiltshire.
I'll make a motion to approve the change order.
Mike?
He's yelling at me. I'll make a motion to approve the change order number 2 to Hayner Swanson in the amount of not to exceed $16,300.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to award the approval of a contract for Hayner Swanson, change order number 2 in the amount of $16,300 and a not to exceed. Any questions?
I do have a question.
Yes. Alderman Liu.
Thank you. You explained to us about hard costs and soft costs, and I just am a little confused as to why you prefaced that, how that connects to this change order. So if you could just explain that.
Sure. I think that's going to happen throughout this entire project. We're going to be introducing concepts to you on construction that many of you probably haven't been involved in construction before. So, and we have separate reports that Harvey does. And in future meetings when we're actually doing the construction, Harvey's going to be presenting invoices for the work that they've accomplished during the preceding month. And so my telling you hard versus soft, it's just more tutorial. Everything you're going to be seeing for the next few months is going to be soft costs, because Harvey's not going to start anything really until the summer.
The definition that I've heard that tries to make it easier for people is if you took the school and tipped it upside down, everything that fell out would be soft costs. Anything that didn't fall out would be hard costs. So it's desks, chairs, whatever. There's a lot of things that are soft costs, but that's basically, it's not part of the actual walls and floors and
Okay, thank you. Just further, and you mentioned contingency, and I thought that was going to be have something to do with this, but this in fact isn't really have anything to do with contingency.
No, this particular, for Hayner Swanson was programmed. So we're going to be getting into the budget a little bit later.
Okay,
I think that's the next topic. Maybe some of the stuff will be a little more
thank you.
easier to understand.
yes, Mr. DeBois.
Yeah, if I may, for those that have never been involved in a large commercial construction project, we are so used to the lingo, the acronyms. Going forward, if we say something that you do not understand, please correct us to go back and explain it. I appreciate it, because for us, it just flies off your tongue. We've been doing it for so long. But just so you understand, there are three parts. There's a total project cost in construction. That takes into consideration the hard cost, the bricks and mortar, everything that won't fall out of a school, and the soft cost, which is all the engineering, your furniture, fixtures, equipment, that type of thing. So those two items make up a total project cost. So if you'll hear us talk about total project costs or construction cost or soft cost, that's what we're referring to. But going forward, if there is a term that we throw out there that nobody knows, please, better for us to explain it to you. Thank you.
Question?
Yes, Alderman Lu.
Thank you. So when you mentioned contingency, it made me wonder, you explained contingency, and I've heard this discussion before because you explained this at the Performing Arts Center meeting. But you mentioned contingency in terms of if we decided halfway through the project we wanted something that hadn't been really quoted. But in fact, the contingency is also going to be absorbing any, let's say, errors in changes in pricing, changes in supply costs and things like that.
There are two contingencies in a construction project. The construction manager's contingency, that we will show and apply at the bottom of an estimate. That is to cover the risk of a guaranteed maximum price. We look at it, no offense, gentlemen, all drawings aren't 100%. They can't be. There's just so much information. So there are things that'll crop up that we'll talk about, and I think the proof's in the pudding here based on the amount of work that we've done together, that we work it out in such a fashion that it's either an owner contingency or a contractor contingency. I can't tell you how many change orders have come through where we tell you what the total dollar amount, but it's not a hit to the project because it'll be coming out of contingency. Okay, so you'll see it all highlighted what the change was to track it from an auditing standpoint. At the bottom, we say what contingency is being used from, and the bottom line typically is zero. So there's no hit to the job. It's not adding anything additional. It's being encompassed within the number. The second contingency is an owner contingency, and that's pretty much for unknowns. And what that entails would be a lot of times you don't know everything underground, for example. You can't see it. We'll do borings, but a boring is what's right there. I've seen projects where you could start a project, and as you excavate and start getting down to subgrade, all of a sudden you have a large deposit of peat, okay, that nobody knew about. That's an unknown. That would be an owner contingency item, okay? Much like at Sunset, when we ran into the issue of the overhang, the overhangs on both sides of the classrooms looked great. There was, from a surface standpoint, they looked perfectly fine. When we cut them open and made a determination on how they were originally put together with wire about as thick as this paper clip that were deteriorated, it became apparent that we had a major issue on our hands. Totally unknown. There was no way of knowing it. You're going to go cut it open ahead of time. That was an owner contingency item. Contingencies are used for those items. We do not use contingency without the approval of this committee. We will give you a running list of what items have been tracked to the contingency item. So you will know at any point in time what's left in contingency. As the projects draw to a near close, first Fairgrounds, then Pentauch, and then the new school, it's going to be an interesting conversation going forward, I suspect, amongst this table of whether we take any unused funds that haven't been used and apply it to that school, or do you wait until the very end of the new school to see what you want to do? Because you will have the ability to roll that money. It's one bond. So you could take the savings of Pentateuch and hold it aside and create yourself additional contingency if you want. Or you could spend it. The rest there is if you need it later. So there'll be lengthy discussions going forward on how to use the contingency, when to use the contingency. We operate on an open book approach. You're going to know and understand every dollar. For those that have been with us before, our applications for payment, everything, there's a lot of contractors that will just say, we're 30% on the drywall, and they'll bill for 30%. We actually include every invoice, every application for payment that we've received, and that's all we bill for. So you could technically almost audit the job as we submit our applications for payment. And that'll happen once a month, and that's where you folks will approve the bill for us to get paid.
All set? Yeah, contingencies, oh,
Jessica Brown, this is actually just a kind of a question out of curiosity. Do you more frequently see contingency budgets used during renovations of existing spaces or on new builds?
Obviously, renovations are more difficult because you don't know everything and how a school was originally constructed, because it's behind masonry walls or it's covered up with plaster that can't be removed at a point in time. So your contingency will be a little greater on a renovation versus a new project. Once you're out of the ground on a new project, I like to think we're almost home free at that point in time. After the job has been totally bought out, we're through the shop drawing process, we got the foundation in and the steel's going up. At that point, and I think Chairman Dowell can attest to this, then we start talking as the project unfolds and we move forward. This contingency, yes, it's our contingency to manage the risk, but it's the city's money. And it's not, we look at it that it's not right to get to the very end and give you back a pot of money where you might want to have employed that elsewhere or back into the project. So we will have discussions ongoing many, many times on where we are in contingency. How do you want to spend it? Do you want to save it and roll it into the next project or keep it as additional contingency? There'll be many discussions on that going forward. You can count on that.
so all contingencies, again, will be approved at this committee. And which contingency it comes out of will also be done here. I will say that in working with Harriman and Harvey, there's never been real issues. When we built these two high schools, there were hundreds of change orders. If you change, you're going to buy blue chairs instead of green chairs, that's a change order. So not all change orders are an expense, and not all change orders are a negative. Sometimes something happens that we're not going to do something and we get credit back for it. Not often, but sometimes. So that will all be going forth, and it'll be all part of the budget process. And when we get done the project, if we have money left over in contingency, there's a number of things that can be done with it. It can be reapplied to another school project like we've done on the last 5 renovations to offset the cost of any new project, or
And everybody gets reelected.
and we can go there. All right, so you, let's see, we did vote on that, right? No? All right, so the motion on the floor is to approve the contract to Hayner Swanson in an amount not to exceed $16,300. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Smith, budget overview?
Actually, I have one more contract to award. This was not in your packet that you received in the mail, but was emailed to everybody. It was a company called Milbourne and McBroom. They are a geotechnical engineer. So Carl discussed a little bit about foundations and dirt and discovering things underneath the surface. That's what these people are for. They've already done a fair amount of work for us this past summer. Again, that was in phase 1. This is phase 2 work, where the architect has identified some additional areas where they're going to be working in that they need more data, see what's underneath the ground. One of the more expensive mistakes we do sometimes is not doing enough testing. We're trying to do the right amount of testing here, and that's what this scope of work is. Part of it is, well, Jamie might talk to it. We're talking about an addition in front of the school. So the main office at Fairgrounds Middle School is going to push out a little bit into that front area, and we need to see what's underneath the surface there. I think that's probably the main thing. So Milbourne and McBroom proposed, they received the description from Harriman, and they're proposing to do the work for a not-to-exceed amount of $5,600.
So I need a motion to approve a contract, Malone and McBroom, for an amount not to exceed $5,600 to undertake the work that Mr. Smith just described. Alderman Wilshire?
I will make a motion to approve the $5,600 to Malone and McBroom for geotechnical services.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion? See, you did say not to exceed, right? Okay, the motion is to not to exceed $5,600 to McBroom and McBride. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Smith?
Okay, as I think Mr. Donovan mentioned, we're going to be looking at, we set up the accounting for this project for all 3 schools. So there's going to be a separate financial sheet for each school. There are various reasons for that. Part of it was the city setting it up that way, but also we're hoping that there'll be state aid down the line, and we'll have to, so we need to keep track of the funds separately. So there are currently 5 financial sheets in your package. I'll just go through them briefly. You'll have these in every month. So there's one just entitled the Financial Report, Joint Special Building Committee for the Middle School Construction and Renovation Project. So this will list all the funds spent to date. The top half are the general categories where they're being spent, such as the construction manager, the architect, geotechnical surveying, industrial hygienist, et cetera. And then the bottom half shows which specific companies have been paid. So that's that particular sheet. Then I've broken it out into, the next sheet is the phase 1 costs. So as you can see, looking at that, you've already approved the invoice tonight for our PF Environmental, and I'll keep this sheet open for a little bit longer until we're not sure there's aren't any more invoices coming in for phase 1. I think we're pretty close to wrapping that up, though. So then the next 3 sheets show the budgets we've set aside. This was a collaborative effort in terms of the construction manager telling me how much he thinks it's going to cost, the architect telling me what their fees are going to be, and then also FF&E, so that's another term for you. Furniture, furnishings, and
Furniture, furnishings, and equipment.
yes, furnishings, furniture, and equipment. So that's FF&E. You're going to hear that from time to time. We also set aside a fair amount of money for IT infrastructure. So I met with Greg Rodriguez, our interim director for IT, and came up with those costs. The rest of them are primarily just based upon our knowledge and our history of working with these different vendors, what it should cost per each school. As a committee, we have flexibility to move money back and forth if we made an oversight someplace. But this is how the budgets are set up for right now. So you'll see a new middle school budget that comes to $82,943,306. The Fairgrounds Middle School project is a little bit over $12 million, and Pentauch is about $24.5 million. So as you see invoices come in, both the architect and the construction manager are going to be invoicing us by those schools. So any questions about how that's set up?
Questions on the way the budget's going to be handled? Nope. Okay. Thanks, Mr. Smith. Oh.
I'm sorry, I do have a question. On the new middle school project, for the new one, does that include that ground floor wing?
It does.
It does, okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure.
That was about $4.8 million.
Yeah,
Yes. And the goal is when we complete this project, again, finish it ahead of schedule and under budget. But getting back to people thinking that everything's being rushed, we are not putting shovels in the ground anytime soon. So there's a lot of work to be done. Harriman's got to go through all these meetings and develop drawings and make changes, and so there'll be plenty of time and from necessity input from several people, as there has been in the conceptual design. And the way things are laid out right now can change. The only thing I would caution is it'll concern me gravely if there's anything that comes up that's going to increase the cost of this project. But I'm only one, but that's just my feeling. Okay. Public comment. Is there anybody who would like to speak? No? Mr. Markle? No? Okay. Comments by committee members. All questions have been asked and you're all up to speed and ready to go. All right. We don't need a non-public. Do I hear a motion? Alderman Wilshire.
Motion to adjourn.
Can she put her mic on this time? Motion on the floor is to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned at 8:22.